Hey guys, so I'm sitting here in front of my tarot tower um, because I'm gonna do a VR to, well, actually, I'm combining two VRs, tarot first and how I do tarot. I think that's what it's called. Um, and that's because I really wanted to do the how I do tarot VR, but then like half the questions are very deck focused, and I thought it'd be more interesting to do a more, I guess, personalized sharing of my own practice and how it started, because I feel like there's not really that many people talking about that on YouTube anyway, and it's just interesting to hear how everyone sort of ended up here. So the first prompt I'm gonna answer, my first encounter with tarot. I had no encounters with tarot until I bought my first deck. I was sitting in my living room and I had this random thought pop into my head. I'm gonna buy a tarot deck, and that's exactly what I did. I'll leeway that into the next prompt. My first deck was the Spellcaster's Tarot. And of course, then my first mass market deck also. My first indie deck, I think was the Moonchild Tarot. I don't even know if it's still an indie deck, to be honest with you, but when I bought it, it was an indie deck. And yeah, I've talked about the Moonchild Tarot. Okay, my first Kickstarter deck, I actually just got. I backed this maybe like over a year ago. I have decks that have since that started as Kickstarter campaigns, but I didn't back them when they were on Kickstarters, because I didn't know about them at the time. I just found out afterwards that that's how they started. So the first one that I've actually backed is the Witch deck. You can see the deck creators down there. I'm probably not going to pronounce correctly. And yeah, this is my first Kickstarter deck. Why did I back this deck? I had reached out to the creators, one of them, I'm not sure. I think I messaged the person on Instagram, just because I was curious, because when I backed it, the deck wasn't done yet. And I had just wanted to ask if there were going to be more women of color in the deck than the 3 or 4 that were sort of highlighted in the campaign. And why did I ask that? Well, obvious reasons, and because I knew I'm trying, and I've always tried to be very conscious about the decks that I purchase. And I already have decks that maybe are not exactly like this, but that could fill the same purpose. And so I was hoping, and I was excited by the fact that the campaign did show women of color in this sort of art style, which my front-facing camera is not doing justice to, but it's a beautiful deck. And so anyway, I asked that question, and the response was a very strong yes. That was absolutely the plan. That there would be more than 3 or 4 women of color that were featured in the Kickstarter campaign. And the result was 6. There are 6 women of color in this deck. 2 older women. Oh wait, that's not one. That's the, like, a little extra card. There's 2 older women, and then there's, oh, here she is. 2 older women. The Divine Masculine is a person of color, and Then there's this guy. I'm not really sure what he is, but he's not a woman of color. So yeah. And then all of these are young white women. That doesn't detract from the aesthetic beauty of the deck in any way. And I am still going to try to work with it. I'll give it a shadow season. I only sort of harp on that because had I known that the deck would still represent women of color as a minority, I wouldn't have purchased it because I already have so many decks like that I love and I enjoy working with them, but I was looking for something different. It didn't really deliver on that front. So we'll see how it sort of contributes to my practice. It's a very thoughtful deck as far as the guidebook, and the images are not, the images are intentional. Like, you know how sometimes a lot of these oracle decks seem like cash grabs where like you just put like easy images on a card and then you write something semi-meaningful about it and you just market it as a deck because that's very trendy right now. This doesn't feel like that, and I like that about this deck. So hopefully we work out. My first tarot YouTuber was Tarot Oracle, who I still watch. I think that it's a very refreshing, practical approach to tarot, and he has a lot of really great lessons on there that are completely free and valuable. And so that was my first tarot YouTuber, and I honestly don't regularly watch many tarot YouTubers, but he's still in the lineup of things when I'm flipping through YouTube that I watch. My first tarot book, I think it was maybe Understanding the Tarot. I don't really remember the name of it. I'll put in a picture. But the first tarot book that I finished was 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. And that's a really good book. I mean, I'm surprised. It's really hard for me to finish like books that aren't fictional. And I did finish that. The minors got a little but like the majors were really interesting, and there's a very like philosophical and psychological approach, and I thought that was great. Yeah. What else? My first tarot podcast. I don't really listen. There's a podcast. Oh man, what's the name of it? The Sixth Sense Society. It's not really a tarot podcast, but they do have some episodes in which they discuss tarot. And I really enjoyed that podcast. I actually started listening to that podcast. Wait, let me not lie. I don't remember. I might have found that podcast before I got my first tarot deck, but the episodes that I would listen to were more like about, they would have like paranormal investigators on the show, and discuss like occult practices and things like that. That have absolutely nothing to do with tarot directly. So it's a really well-rounded show or podcast, and that was probably my first podcast that was in any way related to the spiritual and occult. And I'm not really a podcast person. I don't even listen to that one that much anymore. So first and last, maybe. I didn't stop listening for any particular reason. I would recommend, checking it out. I'm not a podcast person. My first tarot course. Never took a tarot course. Don't get me started on tarot courses. My first teaching I learned my first teaching I relearned in a way that better suited me. I would have to say nothing really specific, but I'd have to go with the court cards. Learning the court cards. They're still like often a struggle for me. I would say that I sort of had a breakthrough when I integrated the idea that they mean nothing without context. And 99% of the time, the best context you'll have for a court card is its relation to another court card. And I'm actually reading a book right now about quantum physics. It's not like a textbook or anything, but it's a book that sort of discusses the idea that everything is a relational existence based on many quantum theories. So yeah, with the court cards, and it's true of people, like, I mean, our relationships and our personality even is formed based on our social interaction. And so without the context of another court card, the meaning of one court card is very, very vague and abstract. Can't really pinpoint exactly what that court card is showing up for if you don't frame it around its relation to other court cards, even if those court cards aren't in the spread. You know what I mean? Like, if you, like, it's easier to understand the Page of Cups when she shows up if you remember her relationship to the Knight and the Queen and the King of Cups. You know? But that's just my take on it, because I also kind of approach it from a psychological, I don't want to say background, I don't have a psych background, but a psychological school of thought. The first tarot deck I rehomed was and only tarot deck I rehomed was the, I want to say it's called the Weaver's Tarot. It's by, I have the box here. Well, not the box for that one specifically, but Threads of Fate. Threads of Fate. The Weaver Tarot by the Threads of Fate business, I guess. It's an indie deck. And I rehomed that because I purchased that deck with another deck, not from them. And I was talking to one of my friends about it. And I don't know, I just felt called to just give it to her. And I didn't miss it. I honestly, forgot that I ever even had it. And then I never used it. I literally gave it to her a week after I got it. I had given it to her to look at, and then I was like, you know what, just keep it. And it felt like it just belonged with her. And then for my birthday this year, my boyfriend got me the Rose edition of the Weaver's Tarot, and I love it. The one I gave away was, I want to say it was holographic, maybe? I think it was holographic. And my boyfriend got me the Rose edition. And I actually have been loving working with that deck because the artwork is not, it's just not my cup of tea. We don't have to go into a review of the Weaver's Tarot right now. But because it's so minimal and means nothing to me, it really has helped me just trust that first initial gut instinct and reaction to a card when you pull it, without then overthinking all the other parts that are in the card and thinking oh, am I supposed to be including this as well in my interpretation, and yada yada yada, yada yada yada. So I've actually really liked working with a deck that is so minimal. and I'm not rehoming that one. The next deck I'm going to rehome at some point. I really don't like the Tarot of Oppositions. I never worked with it. I looked through it and I took some notes on the imagery and the implications of like the artwork and stuff, but I just don't like it. I don't know. I don't like the artwork all that much, and it doesn't really do anything for me. But I still have it in my collection. My bottom shelf is eventually going to be decks that could possibly end up somewhere else. Not because I don't, like the Tarot of Oppositions I don't care for, but some of them I really do like. It's just I know that I could live without them. And so when I'm doing my next purge of my possessions, some of them might not be around anymore, but I haven't really decided yet. I might also use them for like artwork. I'm actually going to skip the next prompt because I just talked about artwork. The first tarot inspired artwork was this just sketch that I did in my art journal. My Page of Wands inspired sunbather there. First deck that touched me emotionally, and I've talked about this deck I think at least once or twice, definitely once, maybe twice, on my channel, and it's the Gift of Life Tarot. I'll leave a link if you want to hear me rant about the Gift of Life Tarot, but it's a deck based on the photography of the creator. A lot of peoples of the Caribbean, and I forgot where else she traveled, but in any event, it's really vulnerable, and the deck actually did make me cry, and it's humbling to even speak about this deck. So I think that's it for tarot first. So I only chose a couple of questions out of how I do tarot. What do you like about tarot? My favorite thing about tarot is how connected it allows me to feel, and empowered in the fact that I can access that connection. At a very young age, I was disillusioned with the typical idea of prayer. Although I did grow up in a spiritual household. I say spiritual just because it was a household very against organized religion, but it was Christian based. Not what spiritual has come to me now in 2022, 23. So yeah, I became disillusioned with prayer because of personal experiences early on. And I think tarot has helped heal that, and that notion of what it means to communicate with a higher energy. What do I use it for? Exactly what I just said. I use it to communicate with higher energy. There's a lot of different philosophies behind sort of how tarot works. You don't even need to use tarot simply because you believe in communicating with something higher than yourself. It could be the most like unspiritual experience, honestly. It could be as simple as putting your playlist on shuffle and the song that comes on is like speaking to you. Although that is pretty spiritual, in my opinion. But there doesn't have to be anything like woo-woo-y about it. It could just be like any other artwork that speaks to you. I think you draw from what's in front of you and you get from it what you need at the time. It's psychology, really. But I do approach it that way, but I also personally believe that I use it as a tool of communication with myself, with my guides. And it's not like those aren't like exclusive of each other. What question I would never ask the tarot? I mean, obviously I would never like ask the tarot like something like to map out what the rest of my life could potentially look like, or like how I might pass, or I don't know, nothing too long term or like in the future. But I also don't think, if I'm not meant to know the truth of what I'm asking yet, then I'm not going to get the answer. So, I mean, yeah, if I'm not supposed to know, I'm not going to find out. What you need for yourself. Oh, can't read my handwriting. When you read for yourself, what do you look for and what kind of questions do you ask? Kind of touched on that already, but usually when I'm reading for myself, it's because I am trying to just work through a thought process and sort of see different options and potential outcomes. It's just like map making. I usually don't I don't do daily pulls. I don't do nightly pulls. I'm very, and I don't do like I don't know, not really sure what the best word for this would be, but like maybe I don't do like inspirational pulls. Like I don't need to ask like, how can I honor my highest self today? Like I don't need to ask those types of questions, because I have, tarot is just one tool that I use in my practice. And while it's probably my favorite tool, I don't need to use it as like a motivational speaker. So, not that there's anything wrong with that, if is part of a practice. I just don't need it for that reason. And then the last question or prompt, advice for someone just starting. I would have to say, and this is also maybe not a super popular opinion, but my advice to people just starting is don't let the tarot community influence your learning. Oftentimes you'll buy a deck and you'll see in the guidebook, it'll say to just just create your own understanding of the cards before you read about the meanings, right? And then it proceeds to have a whole guidebook about the meanings of the card. However, I still do that to this day. With the Spellcaster's Tarot, I actually did that blindly. Like I would have the card face down and I held the card and I just journaled. I still have it to this day, like what I felt, what I saw, how that card made me, what it provoked within me, before I knew what the card even was. And this was the first interaction I had with my tarot deck. And now, still, I did a video on working with the Frank Tarot where I cover up the card title and I just look at the imagery and just see what I get from it. I haven't done it with the card face down in a while, actually, but I might go back to that. And just as sort of like a more intuitive exercise. And I'm doing it right now with another deck I just got, which maybe I'll do a video on. It's a collage deck, and there's no pip, well, it's definitely not a pip deck, but there's no pip indicators. Like in the Four of Cups, there's not 4 cups anywhere to be found, for example. And so it's a great deck to do that exercise with. I just and I shuffled it, so it's not in order, and I just am working with 10 at a time. Titles are covered, and I'm just looking at the imagery, and it's not the most obvious. You know what? I actually have one right here. So, again, front-facing camera, my bad. I literally just covered this with washi tape. So some of them you can you'll get a sense of what the card could be, but not so immediately, where you don't have to work through your understanding of the artwork and your relationship to the artwork. And I find that doing it this way and then uncovering what the card is, you learn like a whole new layer that you probably hadn't considered before to that specific card. I did it with the court cards in that deck, and I really found that I developed a connection to those people more so than in a deck that's more symbolic. But anyway, I digress a lot. So yeah, find your own way to get to know the cards without the preconceived notions of what they mean. That was my advice. My second piece of advice, if you've made it this far, don't, and this is to piggyback off of my first piece of advice. There's some very popular tarot courses out there that cost about a month's rent, if not more, depending on what state you live in. And they're very, I would say, tempting because they're offered by some very prominent people, whatever the fuck that means, in the tarot community. You don't need that. I would say that I mean, you know what? Everyone learns in their own way. But you don't have to come into a community that is freeing and immediately indoctrinate yourself before even developing your own ideas. So my advice would be, if you are the type of person who does really want to take a course, just wait until you're not so impressionable. That would be my advice. That's also just my opinion. I am not trying to argue with anybody, but the question is, what would my advice be to someone who just started? And that's it. You know, even if you give that to somebody that might not listen to you, but that's definitely what I would tell someone. So yeah, open to more questions in the comments or just like a discussion about anything. And I'll see you guys next time.